baby after his wife's death, until one day a random babysitter took the child in her arms. But who she really was would turn everything upside down. Write in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The rain fell lightly over San Francisco, draping the city in a thin silver curtain. Yet, inside the sleek, glass-walled mansion overlooking the bay, the silence was suffocating. The kind of silence that pressed against the walls like a second skin. Cold, constant, and unbearably loud in its emptiness. Graham Whitmore stood at the edge of his home office, staring out at the skyline with vacant eyes, the soft buzz of his muted phone the only noise in the room. Below his tailored gray suit, his chest felt hollow, as though something vital had been carved out and forgotten. It had been 92 days since Elizabeth died. 92 days of mechanical movements, endless apologies to stockholders, and sleepless nights listening to his infant son's screams echo through marble halls. Oliver, his 6-month-old son, had been crying for 3 hours straight. Not a hunger cry, not a diaper cry. It was deeper than that. It had edge, raw, desperate, heartbreaking. Graham closed his eyes. His temples throbbed. No way. That's 3 nannies this week, he muttered under his breath, gripping the edge of his desk as the voice on the other end of the call stammered. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore, his assistant said hesitantly. She quit this morning. Said she's never seen anything like it. She was crying herself when she left, said she felt like a failure. She was the 4th one in 10 days. Graham pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed. Find another. I don't care what it costs. Just get someone here today. Yes, sir. He ended the call and threw the phone onto the desk. The room fell back into silence, save for the faint, muffled wailing coming from the nursery upstairs. He hated himself for not going up there. He hated that he didn't know what to do. He was a man who closed billion-dollar deals, who could negotiate hostile mergers and outmaneuver Fortune 100 CEOs. But when it came to the trembling body of his screaming son, he was completely powerless. Downstairs, the front door clicked open softly. Nia Brown had never been in a house this large. Even the front foyer was larger than the apartment she had once shared with her sister in East Oakland. She walked in quietly, her worn tennis shoes squeaking slightly on the polished wood floors. In one hand, she held her cleaning supplies. In the other, the folded work order from the temp agency, Emergency Housekeeping Services, 1-day assignment. She wasn't supposed to speak to the homeowner, wasn't supposed to go anywhere but the assigned areas. Just wipe down surfaces, clean the windows, make the place presentable. She needed this job, desperately. Her younger sister was waiting on money for medication, hospital bills that piled up faster than Nia could ever save. Being new in San Francisco meant starting from the bottom, and today this mansion was her bottom rung. As she moved through the open, sterile living room, something struck her. The house was too quiet, not peaceful, unnaturally still. Then, through the ceiling, a sound cut through the air like a blade. A baby's cry. Nia froze mid-step. She had helped raise 4 cousins back home in Oakland, had volunteered at the church nursery for years, and that sound was not the average "I'm wet" or "I'm hungry" cry. This was different. Frantic. It was a sound she would never forget. The same pitch she had heard the day her cousin lost her child to pneumonia. Her eyes went upward instinctively. The agency hadn't said anything about a child being in the home, but clearly one was. She put down her cleaning rag slowly, unsure what she was doing. Technically, she wasn't supposed to go up there. It wasn't her place. but something in her chest tugged hard. She stepped lightly toward the curved staircase and ascended. With each step, the crying grew louder, angrier. By the time she reached the second floor, it felt like the house itself was trembling. A door at the end of the hallway stood ajar. She walked toward it slowly, heart pounding, and gently nudged it open. Inside, in a sleek designer crib set beneath a minimalist mobile, a tiny baby lay writhing. His little fists balled tightly, face red from screaming, damp curls sticking to his forehead. His cries hit Nia like a physical force, and for a moment, she just stood there, stunned. "Hello?" she called out gently, half hoping someone would suddenly appear. "Is anyone here?" No answer. The baby's shriek grew even more hoarse. Nia stepped closer, hands trembling slightly. "Sweetheart, shh, what's wrong?" she murmured. Her eyes scanned the room. The bottle warmer was unplugged. The diaper pail overflowed. A burp cloth was crumpled on the ground beside a soiled onesie. And the baby, he was soaked. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and the faint sour smell of a dirty diaper wafted up as she leaned over. She found clean diapers and baby wipes in a dresser drawer. Without overthinking, she changed him swiftly, her hands steady from years of practice. Once done, she wrapped him in a soft blanket, picked him up, and cradled him gently. "There we go, baby boy," she whispered, rocking him against her shoulder. She started to hum an old lullaby her grandmother used to sing, the same one she had sung to her sister after their mother died. The crying lessened, then stopped. The silence was so sudden, so complete, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. She kept humming, gently swaying, not daring to sit or move. The baby let out a quiet sigh and pressed his small head against her collarbone. His tiny fingers clung to the fabric of her shirt. Within minutes, his body grew heavy in her arms, completely relaxed. The door slammed open. "What the hell are you doing?" Nia startled, almost losing her grip. A tall man stood in the doorway, white, mid-30s, tailored dark suit, hair slicked back, jaw tight. His tone was sharp, eyes cutting. She began, holding the baby tighter. "He was crying." "I asked who gave you permission to touch my son." Graham stepped forward, posture tense. She backed away instinctively, still holding the baby. "No one, sir, but he—" "Give me Oliver, now." She hesitated. The baby shifted slightly, his tiny mouth opening in protest even before she handed him over. As soon as Graham took him, the crying resumed, louder, more desperate than before. Graham tried to soothe him, rocked him, shushed him. Nothing worked. "I don't understand," he said, glancing at Nia, bewildered. "He calmed down with you." His diaper was dirty, he was sweating, probably hungry too. Graham stared at his son. She was right, he hadn't noticed. He turned back to her. "Have you taken care of children before?" "Yes, sir, my cousins, back home." He paused, then handed the baby back. "Take him again." Nia's eyes widened, but she obeyed. The baby immediately quieted, nuzzling into her shoulder, exhaling with relief. "What's your name?" Graham asked, staring as though trying to decode something beyond her expression. "Nia Brown. I work for the cleaning company." "Where are you from?" "Oakland. I arrived in San Francisco a few months ago." He was silent. For the first time, he really looked at her, not just the uniform, not just the action, but her presence, the calm around her, the instinct. 3 highly qualified nannies had failed. This woman had done what they could not in 5 minutes. "Prepare his bottle," he said quietly. "It's in the kitchen." Nia nodded and headed downstairs with the baby still in her arms. In the kitchen, she moved instinctively. The formula, the measurements, the warm water, all familiar movements. Oliver watched her, his bright blue eyes wide but peaceful. She tested the bottle on her wrist, then brought it to his lips. He drank, calmly, without resistance, without panic. Graham stood in the doorway, silent, watching, his expression unreadable. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. "What time do you finish work today?" he asked, voice low. "In about an hour, sir." "When you're done, come to my office. I have a proposal for you." Nia blinked, unsure of what that meant. She nodded slowly. As she continued feeding the child, something strange stirred inside her. Familiar, yet new. A warmth, a connection, something real. The baby looked up at her, his little hands resting against her chest. And in that moment, she knew she wouldn't sleep the same way again. Whatever the man upstairs was about to ask, she already felt the weight of it pressing softly against her heart. And it scared her. The soft click of the nursery door echoed in Nia's ears as she stepped out, still carrying the now sleeping baby in her arms. The weight of Oliver's small body against her chest felt grounding in a way she couldn't quite explain. As she descended the stairs, each creak of the polished wood beneath her shoes was a reminder that she was in unfamiliar territory, in a world that did not belong to her. And yet, in her arms, this child had stopped crying. He had clung to her, sought her warmth, and found comfort. That alone unsettled her far more than anything else in the pristine, silent mansion. She had barely finished cleaning the bottle and laying the baby gently into the bassinet in the corner of the living room when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, half expecting the severe assistant from earlier, but it was Graham Whitmore. He stood with a rigid posture, arms crossed over his chest, watching her like someone examining a puzzle they couldn't solve. "She drank it all?" he asked, his tone flatter than before, less sharp. She corrected quietly, giving him a glance. "And yes, every drop." Graham looked at the baby, who was now fast asleep, a faint sigh escaping his tiny lips. He looked peaceful, vulnerable, human. "I want you to stay," he said after a pause, his voice suddenly more direct, as if afraid he might reconsider the words if he let them linger too long in his mind. Nia blinked, unsure she had heard him right. "Excuse me? I want you to stay on, as his nanny." "I'm not a professional," she replied quickly. "I was only assigned here to clean." "I don't care." His gaze didn't waver. 4 nannies came through this house in the last 2 weeks. They all had degrees, certifications, years of experience. None of them could calm him. He walked in and he gestured loosely toward the sleeping child. "Whatever you did, it worked." Nia shook her head slowly. "I was just present. Sometimes that's all a baby needs, to feel someone's really there." He said nothing, only stared at her for a long moment before turning on his heel. "When you finish your shift, meet me in my office." She watched him leave, heart hammering. This wasn't the world she was supposed to belong to. Millionaires didn't hire people like her, not for roles that mattered. Still, when her shift ended, she found herself knocking hesitantly on the dark wooden door of the home office. Graham's voice called from within, clipped but calm. "Come in." The room looked exactly like she had expected. Minimalist, masculine, perfect. Heavy books lined the shelves, many unopened. Certificates and accolades adorned the walls. The man himself sat behind an imposing desk, papers spread before him, but his eyes immediately lifted when she entered. "Please, sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She did, smoothing her hands over her jeans and trying not to shrink into herself. "You said earlier that you've taken care of children before." Nia nodded. "Yes, sir. My younger cousins, mostly. my sister's children back in Oakland. And before that, I worked with a family in Kingston, Jamaica, before I moved here. Why San Francisco? The question seemed simple, but Nia felt its weight. She hesitated. My younger sister's sick. Kidney issues. Needs dialysis and medications we can't afford. I make better money here, even with cleaning gigs. He nodded slowly, as if filing the information away. Then he opened a folder on his desk and slid a few papers toward him. Your agency provided references. They said you were responsible, calm, reliable. I tried to be, she murmured. He was quiet for a moment, then spoke with surprising softness. What happened today with my son? I haven't seen him that peaceful since my wife died. Nia didn't speak. She knew this wasn't the kind of pain to rush with platitudes. I want to offer you a full-time position, he continued, as Oliver's live-in nanny. She stared at him, stunned. I don't, she started, but he raised a hand. Listen, I know you're not certified. I don't care. You did something none of the others could, and I care more about my son being okay than a piece of paper on a wall. Nia tried to gather her thoughts. Where would I stay? In the staff quarters. You'd have a weekends off, $20,000 a month. She coughed, nearly choking. 20. She shook her head. That's too much. No, it's what he needs, and what I need. He leaned forward slightly. Miss Brown, I'm not a sentimental man, but I can see what's in front of me. My son stopped screaming in your arms. You're what he needs. Nia looked down at her lap. $20,000 a month. She could send half back home, cover her sister's treatments, and still save. She could finally sleep at night knowing her family wouldn't fall apart. But this wasn't cleaning floors or scrubbing tiles. This was a human life, a baby, a grieving father, a world far from her own. When would I start? She asked quietly. Tomorrow. She exhaled slowly, nodded. All right. The next day, Nia arrived with a small suitcase and a quiet determination in her chest. Graham met her at the door, no longer in his suit, but in a cashmere sweater and slacks, sleeves pushed up. He looked more human, less like the man from the office. He didn't say much, simply showed her to the staff quarters. Simple, private, more than comfortable. Then he led her upstairs to the nursery. She has no routine, he explained. She? Nia asked, raising an eyebrow. Sorry, Graham corrected himself, clearing his throat. He eats whenever he wants, barely sleeps. The last nanny said it was impossible. Nia stepped into the nursery and smiled at the baby lying in the crib, kicking his feet softly. Hello, little man, she whispered, crouching beside him. Do you remember me? Oliver made a sound like a gurgle, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. She lifted him gently, holding him close. We're going to fix that chaos, okay? Babies need rhythm like music. And so she began. In the days that followed, the mansion began to shift. Nia implemented structure, not strict but consistent. Breakfast at 8, playtime at 10, a walk in the garden before noon, nap at 2, dinner at 6, and a gentle bath with lullabies at 8. It wasn't immediate, but each day brought more ease. Oliver laughed for the first time one afternoon while she blew raspberries on his tummy. The sound bounced through the house like a miracle. Graham, returning from work earlier than expected, stopped in the hallway outside the nursery and listened. He didn't enter. He didn't want to disrupt it. Each night, Nia sang soft songs as she rocked Oliver to sleep. Sometimes she read him stories she remembered from her childhood, Caribbean folk tales, lullabies her grandmother had whispered into her braids. The baby listened, wide-eyed, and then drifted into slumber, Graham watched it all, sometimes from afar, standing in the doorway, other times from the corner of the room, quiet and still. He began to look forward to coming home. The tension in his shoulders lessened. The shadows beneath his eyes lightened. He started asking questions. How much formula was best? What toys were appropriate? Was it okay to play music while Oliver napped? One afternoon, he arrived home early and heard peals of laughter coming from the kitchen. Curious, he peeked inside. Nia was making silly faces, holding Oliver in her arms as she danced slightly to a rhythm only she heard. The baby squealed with joy, his hands reaching up to touch her cheeks. Graham stood there for a long moment, watching. Something tugged at him. "You look like you're having fun," he said, stepping into the room. Nia startled. "Mr. Whitmore, I didn't see you." He gave a small smile. "I came home early. How was he today?" "Very well," she replied. "He ate all his food, took a 2-hour nap." He reached out for his son. Oliver looked at him with mild curiosity, but didn't cry when he was lifted from Nia's arms. Instead, he touched his father's chin lightly, then settled quietly. "He seems calmer," Graham said, surprised. "Babies sense adult energy," Nia said, matter-of-factly. "If you're calm, he will be too." He looked at her. No one had spoken to him like that since Elizabeth. Not with pity, not with fear, just with honesty. "Thank you," he said softly. She nodded and turned to finish preparing the baby's dinner, but something lingered in the air. A shift. A quiet recognition neither of them dared name. As she spooned pureed carrots into the little bowl, she glanced back at Graham holding his son, really holding him. He wasn't looking at his watch or checking his phone. He was just there. And for the first time in a long while, so was she. What neither of them knew was that a storm was coming, not one with thunder and rain, but with memory and truth. And when it hit, nothing in that mansion would remain the same. The evening air carried the scent of damp earth and eucalyptus as twilight settled over San Francisco. The view from the Whitmore mansion stretched far, the hills folding gently into darkness, and the city lights began to blink alive like stars descending to earth. Inside the house, the atmosphere had changed. Where once there had been only silence and cries, now the rooms breathed with something softer. A child's laughter echoed from the nursery. The clatter of bottles in the sterilizer, the gentle rustle of blankets, the occasional humming of lullabies, these became the new rhythm of life. And at the center of it all, Nia moved with quiet confidence, her presence anchoring the household like a steady current beneath turbulent waves. Graham noticed the changes with increasing clarity. He no longer dreaded coming home. Each time he stepped through the front door, the air felt lighter. He could hear his son cooing from across the house, responding to Nia's voice, or simply murmuring to himself, content. The way Oliver clung to her, relaxed in her arms, had become more than routine. It was something deeper, familiar, natural. And Graham found himself drawn in. At first, only from a distance. He would stand at the threshold of the room, watching Nia read stories, her voice full of life and warmth. Then, slowly, he began joining her, asking questions about feeding schedules, sitting in on bedtime routines, even learning how to swaddle a baby properly. There were moments he'd glance at her and feel something tighten in his chest. Not desire, at least not yet, but recognition. She was someone who saw his son, who saw him. Not Graham Whitmore, the CEO, not the man in the obituary photograph beside his wife's name, but simply a father trying to hold his world together. That Friday evening, The forecast warned of a Pacific storm, but neither Nia nor Graham paid much attention. The sky darkened earlier than usual, and clouds rolled in thick and low. Oliver had been fussy most of the day, as if sensing something was coming. Nia held him close as she paced the nursery, whispering nonsense words and pressing soft kisses to his curls. The baby finally drifted off just as thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. Downstairs, Nia was in the kitchen preparing a bottle when the first flicker of lights made her pause. She glanced at the ceiling. Another flicker, then darkness. Complete and sudden. She stood still for a heartbeat, holding the warmed bottle in one hand. Outside, the rain had started to tap against the windows. Inside, silence. A flash of concern darted through her chest. She moved quickly, carefully up the stairs, her phone casting a dim beam of light ahead of her. Just as she reached the nursery door, another set of footsteps came from the hallway. "Nia?" Graham's voice sounded sharper than usual. "Are you okay?" "We're fine," she said, turning towards the sound, "but Oliver's in the bath." He appeared in the faint light from her phone, holding his own flashlight in one hand. He was barefoot, sleeves rolled up, and for a moment he looked years younger, less like the man she met weeks ago, and more like someone she might have known a long time ago. "Let me help you," he said without hesitation. Together, by the soft glow of their phones, they got Oliver out of the bath and wrapped him in a towel. The baby was startled by the darkness at first, but quickly settled, seemingly soothed by the quiet voices and gentle movements. They brought him downstairs to the living room where Graham found candles in the kitchen drawers. Within minutes, the room was bathed in warm, flickering light. The rain fell harder outside now, creating a soft pattering against the glass walls. Inside, it felt like the world had shrunk to just the three of them. Nia spread out a thick blanket on the living room rug and laid Oliver down. He babbled quietly, playing with his feet, fascinated by the dancing shadows on the ceiling. Graham sat down nearby, stretching out his long legs, watching the baby with something like awe. "He seems content," Graham said. "Babies aren't bothered by the dark like we are," Nia replied. "They trust the people they're with more than what they can see." They sat in silence for a while, the candlelight softening the angles of the room, the sound of rain becoming a kind of lullaby. "Do you miss home?" Graham asked suddenly, his voice low. Nia turned to him, surprised. It was the first time he had asked her something personal. "Every day," she answered honestly, "especially my sister, and my grandmother. She raised us after our mother passed." "Is she the one who's ill?" Nia nodded. "She has heart problems, diabetes. She needs surgery, but it's expensive." Graham ran a hand through his hair, staring into the candle flame. "My wife was sick for a long time before she died," he said quietly. "It wasn't sudden. We had time to prepare, but somehow it didn't make it easier." Nia didn't respond right away. She watched Oliver stretch his tiny fingers toward the light. "What was she like?" she asked gently. "Elizabeth?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "She was everything I wasn't. Warm, joyful. She talked to strangers in grocery stores, waved to children on the street. She made me laugh when I didn't know I needed to. She had this gift for seeing the good in people." Nia listened, not interrupting. The way he spoke, it wasn't with bitterness or guilt, but with something softer, grief shaped by time. "Is that why you fell in love with her?" she asked. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe she just loved me despite the parts I couldn't fix." Oliver yawned and Nia picked him up gently, rocking him against her chest. "You're not as broken as you think," she said quietly. He looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly. "How can you say that?" You barely know me." "I know pain," she said simply, "and I know the difference between people who hurt because they want to and people who hurt because they're scared. You're the second kind." Graham didn't speak. Her words had slipped past his defenses before he even had the chance to build them. He shifted closer without realizing. His gaze moved to her hands as she held his son, then to her face, calm, steady, beautiful in the candlelight. "What am I afraid of, then?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "Of feeling something again. Of letting someone in, only to lose them too." He swallowed hard. The flicker of a candle trembled. "You've seen through me in weeks," he murmured, "what most people haven't in years. I didn't try to. It just happened." Oliver was asleep, his breathing slow and steady. Nia stood up carefully and carried him upstairs, laying him gently in the crib. She covered him with a blanket, kissed his forehead, and lingered just a moment longer, watching his chest rise and fall. When she returned to the living room, Graham was still there, sitting on the floor, staring at the candles. "Are you afraid of anything?" he asked as she sat back down. "Of many things," she said after a pause. "Of not being able to help my grandmother, of never really belonging anywhere, of getting too close to people I can't have." Her voice caught on that last part. He turned to her. His eyes searched hers. "Nia, don't," she said quickly. "We both know this can't happen." But he had already moved closer. His hand reached out, fingers brushing gently against her cheek. "And what if I don't care about what can or can't happen?" Her breath hitched. She had fought these feelings for weeks, pushed them down, rationalized every lingering glance, every softened word. He was her employer, a grieving man, from a world that would never accept someone like her. But in that moment, none of it mattered. His lips met hers in a kiss that was hesitant at first, full of doubt and trembling edges. Then, slowly, it deepened, as if both had been holding their breath for too long. There were no fireworks, no music swelling in the background, only the sound of rain and the warmth of another human being reaching for something real. When they finally pulled away, their foreheads rested together, breaths mingling. "This is wrong," she whispered. "I know," he said. "It could be very complicated. I know." Neither moved. They remained there, suspended in a fragile, perfect silence. But they both knew that when the lights came back on, the world would shift again. And it did. When the power returned just after midnight, the house seemed to exhale, releasing all the warmth and fragility it had held in the candlelit dark. The hum of electricity flickered softly through the walls, lights returning to their clinical brilliance, and appliances quietly blinking awake as if nothing had happened. But something had. The light did not erase the moments that had unfolded between them, nor did it dissolve the silence that lingered now, deeper than before, stretched taut by the weight of what had been shared and what had gone unsaid. By morning, Graham was back to being distant. He greeted Nia with a short nod, barely meeting her eyes, and busied himself with calls in his office. There was no mention of the night before, no reference to the kiss or the quiet vulnerability they had revealed. It was as though the storm had sealed those emotions away with the darkness. Nia told herself it was for the best. She focused on Oliver, who remained her only constant, his bright eyes following her every move, his little hands reaching for her shirt whenever she tried to place him down. Still, there was an ache in her chest. She hadn't expected him to confess anything, but the retreat hurt more than she wanted to admit. She went about her tasks with quiet efficiency, refusing to let herself dwell on his silence. Days passed, each more tense than the last, Graham's behavior remained distant, professional, cordial even, but cold. He no longer lingered to watch her play with Oliver. He no longer asked about the baby's progress. Instead, he buried himself in meetings, business calls, and emails, leaving early and returning late. The house, though no longer filled with crying, once again echoed with a different kind of silence, the kind born not from pain, but from fear and avoidance. On Tuesday afternoon, Graham left early for a meeting in the city. The assistant mentioned he would be gone for several hours, and the staff took the opportunity to catch up on neglected tasks. Nia decided to do a deep clean of the master bedroom, something she had been avoiding. It wasn't her usual duty, but the other housekeeper was out sick, and Nia, restless and seeking distraction, volunteered. She stepped into the room quietly, as if it might betray her presence. The space was sterile and impersonal, despite the fine furniture and expensive fixtures. Nothing about it felt lived in. The bed was made perfectly, untouched. The desk was organized with mechanical precision, but there were hints of a life once shared. An old sweater folded neatly on a chair, a dried bouquet in a vase by the window, its petals pale and curling. She moved methodically, dusting shelves and wiping surfaces. The large oak dresser against the far wall caught her attention. Most drawers were empty or filled with suits folded with military precision, but the bottom drawer stuck slightly when she tried to open it. Curious, she tugged gently. It gave with a soft creak. Inside was a cardboard box covered in a thin layer of dust. Nia hesitated, hand resting on the lid. It wasn't her place. This was personal. She should have left it alone. But something in her chest fluttered with unease. She placed the box carefully on the bed and lifted the top. Inside were photos, letters, and mementos, a faded scarf, a dried corsage, handwritten notes folded into neat squares. And at the bottom, half hidden beneath a soft baby blanket, was a sleek black tablet. She recognized it immediately as a personal device, one of the older models, still with a button on the front. It looked dead. Probably hadn't been touched in months. Still, her fingers reached for it before she could think better of it. As if sensing something, Oliver stirred in the hallway. He had been napping in his portable crib while she cleaned, and she had left the nursery door open to listen for him. His cry was soft but insistent. She picked him up, cradling him against her shoulder as she returned to the bedroom. He settled immediately, his head resting in the curve of her neck. "Nosy, huh?" she murmured with a tired smile. "You woke up just in time to keep me from doing something stupid." But as she shifted him, his tiny hand reached down and slapped against the screen of the tablet. A faint sound echoed in the room, the familiar chime of a device booting up. Nia's breath caught. The screen came alive, surprisingly responsive. She held her breath, half expecting it to shut down again, but it remained lit. A passcode prompt flashed, then vanished as if someone had already disabled it. The home screen displayed a series of video thumbnails, each with a date. The most recent was from nearly 4 months ago, 2 months before Elizabeth's death. Before she could stop herself, Oliver tapped the screen again with curious fingers. The video began to play. Nia froze. On the screen appeared a woman with chestnut hair and striking green eyes. She sat in a sunlit room, the same master bedroom where Nia now stood, though it had looked warmer then. Lived in Elizabeth. Even without meeting her in life, Nia knew it was her. "If you're watching this, I'm probably not here anymore," Elizabeth's voice said, calm and steady. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Nia's heart pounded. She should stop the video. She had no right, but her legs wouldn't move. Oliver watched the screen quietly, as if he too sensed the gravity of what was unfolding. "Graham," the woman continued, "you've always loved with your whole heart, even when you didn't show it, even when you thought you were broken. And I should have told you the truth when I had the chance." Nia stared, frozen. "Oliver. Oliver isn't ours. Not biologically. I know you believed he was born from me, but he wasn't. I'm infertile. I've known for years. I kept it from you because I was afraid. Afraid that if I told you, you'd leave me. Or worse, look at our child and see a lie instead of love." Nia's hand covered her mouth. Her legs nearly buckled. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, still holding Oliver close. "I found a surrogate. Quietly. I paid in cash. I even faked the medical paperwork. I justified it because I told myself the result was love. And when I held him for the first time, I didn't feel shame. I felt like a mother. He's yours, Graham, in every way that matters. He's ours. And I hope one day you'll forgive me." The video ended. The screen returned to the list of files. Nia sat in stunned silence. Oliver reached for the tablet again, but she set it aside, her hands trembling. Her heart felt too large for her chest. What was she supposed to do with this? She had no doubt it was real. Elizabeth's face, her voice, the intimacy of her confession, it had all been honest, unfiltered. She had carried this secret alone and taken it to the grave. But now, by a twist of chance, or fate, Nia had uncovered it. The child, sleeping peacefully in her arms, had no idea that his very existence had been hidden behind a lie. And Graham? Graham had no idea that the woman he had adored had deceived him, not out of malice, but out of fear. That evening, when Graham returned from the city, Nia couldn't meet his eyes. She felt sick with the knowledge, unsure if she had the right to carry it or to speak it. She fumbled with Oliver's dinner, spilling juice twice and dropping a spoon. Graham frowned. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low but probing. "I'm fine," she said too quickly. But she wasn't, and she couldn't pretend. That night, while Oliver slept upstairs, Nia paced the living room with the tablet clutched in her hands. Over and over, she debated. Tell him, don't tell him. Was it her place? Was it even safe? But in the end, the truth was heavier than the fear. When Graham returned from his study and sat with his nightly glass of scotch, Nia approached him. Her fingers trembled as she held out the device. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly. He looked up, brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" She placed the tablet gently on the coffee table. "I found this today while cleaning your room. It wasn't intentional. Oliver touched it, and a video played." His face hardened. That was Elizabeth's tablet. "I think you should watch it." He didn't move. "I didn't mean to pry," she said, voice cracking. "But what she said, you need to see it for yourself." He took the device slowly, unlocking it with practiced fingers. When he saw the video, his expression changed. Stillness settled over him, a kind of storm brewing behind his eyes. He pressed play. Nia sat in silence, her hands clenched tightly in her lap as she watched him watch his wife's confession. His jaw tightened, his knuckles whitened. When the video ended, he didn't speak. For a long time, he didn't even breathe. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like his own, he whispered, "This is a lie." "Graham, this is a lie," he repeated louder. He stood up abruptly, the tablet falling to the floor. "No, she wouldn't do this. She wouldn't. She knew how important this was to me." Nia rose carefully. "She was afraid. You don't know anything." He turned on her, eyes blazing. "You think just because you work here, you can dig through my things? You think you can use this?" "I'm not using anything. I just thought you had a right to know." "No. What you thought," he snapped, "was that this would give you power over me. Maybe you edited it. Maybe you faked it. Maybe you—" "I would never," she said, her voice shaking. "Of course you would," he shouted. "You've been acting differently ever since that night. This was your plan. Manipulate me. Use the baby to worm your way in." Tears filled Nia's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I only wanted to do what was right. For Oliver. For you." He stepped toward her, his voice sharp as glass. "The only right you have is to do your job and keep your mouth shut." The words hit like a slap. "I want you out of this house," he said. "Tonight." Nia stood frozen. "You don't mean that?" "I do. Pack your things. I never want to see you again." An hour later, suitcase in hand, Nia stood at the door. Graham didn't appear. The house, once again, was quiet and cold. Before she left, she crept upstairs to Oliver's room. The baby slept peacefully, unaware that the person he had come to depend on was about to disappear. She bent down, kissed his forehead. "Take care, my love," she whispered. "I'm going to miss you more than you'll ever know." And then she walked into the night, the storm no longer outside, but within her. The bus ride to Sacramento was long, quiet, and without color. Nia sat near the window, her hands tightly clasped in her lap, her small suitcase tucked between her feet. The city blurred past, but she saw none of it. Her mind was frozen in the moment when Graham's voice, so cold and sharp, had told her to leave. Not just the house, but the life she had started to believe in. The image of Oliver's face sleeping in his crib while she whispered her silent goodbye clung to her chest like a stone. Her body was still aching from holding him for the last time. She didn't know what hurt more, being thrown out or the way he had looked at her, as if she had betrayed him, as if she were the lie. By the time the bus pulled into the station in Sacramento, night had fully fallen. The air was warmer here, less humid, and the city moved slower. She had nowhere planned, but she clutched a newspaper she'd picked up at a diner along the highway. She circled a listing in thick pen. Housekeeper wanted, small family, room and board, immediate hire. It wasn't much, but it was something. A woman named Eleanor Harrison answered the call and invited Nia to come that same night. The Harrison house was the opposite of the Whitmore estate. It was small and unpretentious, with creaking stairs, a flower garden full of overgrown daisies, and a chipped mailbox that leaned like it had grown tired of standing upright. Mrs. Harrison opened the door in slippers and a floral robe, her hair a cloud of silver, her face gentle and curious. "You must be Nia," she said. "Come in, dear. You sound exhausted." Nia nodded, stepping over the threshold into a new chapter of her life that felt colder before it even began. She didn't tell Mrs. Harrison much, only that she had been let go suddenly from a nanny job and needed a place to stay. $5,000 a month, meals included. Not much, but we're quiet folk. "You'd have your own room, your own schedule," Eleanor said. "We could use a kind soul like you." Nia accepted with a nod, not for the money or comfort, but because she needed to breathe. The first days passed in a haze. She swept, cooked, made tea, and wiped down picture frames. At night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant ticking of an old grandfather clock downstairs. But her mind was never really in Sacramento. It wandered back to San Francisco, to a mansion on the hill, to a room filled with lullabies and candlelight, to a pair of bright blue eyes that had once looked up at her like she was the entire sky. She dreamed of Oliver. of his giggles, of his little hands wrapping around her finger. And when she woke, her chest ached with absence. Mrs. Harrison noticed her quietness. One afternoon, as Nia folded laundry in the back room, the older woman sat beside her with 2 mugs of tea and a knowing look. "You miss someone," she said. Nia looked down at the folded towel in her lap. "I was caring for a baby. I grew attached. And then I was told to leave." "Was it your child?" "No, but I loved him as if he were." Mrs. Harrison reached out and gently patted her hand. "Love doesn't need paperwork to be real, child. If you loved him, then he loved you too." That night, Nia cried into her pillow, quietly, like a secret she didn't want anyone to know. The tears had waited days to come, and once they started, they didn't stop. Back in San Francisco, the Whitmore estate had once again fallen into shadow. Graham tried to pretend nothing had changed. He immersed himself in work, attending meetings, signing contracts, and pushing forward on a new merger proposal with a Japanese tech firm that promised international expansion and astronomical revenue. On paper, everything was perfect, but Oliver was not. The boy refused to eat. He refused to sleep. He cried until he choked, until his little fists trembled with exhaustion. The new nannies, 4 of them in 10 days, came and went, each leaving faster than the last. The last one, an experienced nurse from Italy, stayed only 24 hours before calling the agency in tears. "This child is not just fussy," she told them. "This child is grieving." Graham sat in the nursery one night, holding his son as he screamed. He tried rocking him, singing softly, offering bottles. Nothing worked. The baby only cried harder, his voice hoarse and broken. "What do you want from me?" Graham asked, his voice cracking. "Just tell me what you want." But Oliver had no words, only pain. For the first time in weeks, Graham broke down. He sat on the floor, back against the crib, his son in his lap, and cried with him. His shoulders shook. His face was wet with tears he hadn't known were still buried inside him. "You miss her, don't you?" he whispered. "You miss Nia." The room was still, but the silence spoke volumes. That night, unable to sleep, Graham returned to the living room and picked up Elizabeth's tablet from where it had landed after he had dropped it in rage. It was still scuffed, the corner dented. He stared at it for a long time before turning it on again. This time, he watched the video all the way through. Not as a man betrayed, but as a man who needed to understand. He saw the way Elizabeth's eyes flickered with fear and love. He listened to her words, not just the confession, but the pain behind them. She hadn't done it to deceive him. She had done it because she believed love could make the lie disappear. She had been wrong, but her fear had been real. Her love, unmistakable. When the video ended, he sat still for a long time. In the morning, he drove to a digital forensics lab across town and handed them the tablet. "I need to know if this video is real," he said. "Any editing, any manipulation, anything." "It'll cost you," the technician said. "I don't care." 2 days later, the call came. "Mr. Whitmore," the technician said, "the video's clean, no signs of editing or tampering. Metadata confirms the timestamp. It's authentic." The world tilted. Graham hung up and sat in his office, staring at nothing. All the walls he had built began to crumble one by one. Elizabeth had lied, but Nia hadn't. She had tried to help. She had given him the truth he was too afraid to see. And he had thrown her out like trash. He had wounded her. He had taken the one person who had truly loved his son and cast her aside in fear. He walked into the nursery. Oliver was lying in his crib, wide-eyed and silent. Graham sat beside him and watched him for a long while. The baby turned his head slightly, as if sensing something. "I'm sorry," Graham said. "I failed you." He didn't know what to do next, but he knew what he had to fix. He reached out to the cleaning agency, begged for contact information. At first, they refused, citing privacy. Then he called Nia's former supervisor, offering to donate to the agency's scholarship fund to cover training for new hires, anything. "Just please," he said, "just give me a way to find her." When he finally got the address in Sacramento, it was past 10 at night. He didn't wait. He packed an overnight bag, left a note for his assistant, and got into his car. He drove through the night, headlights slicing through the dark highway, his mind racing. What would he say? How could he undo the damage? Would she even listen? He didn't know, but he had to try. In Sacramento, Nia had just finished preparing tea for Mrs. Harrison when the doorbell rang. Eleanor looked surprised. "Who on earth would come at this hour?" she said, setting the tray down. Nia stood frozen as the older woman walked to the door. When she opened it, she found a tall man in a dark coat, hair windblown, eyes red from lack of sleep. He stood on the porch with both hands in his pockets, a man who had no more walls left to hide behind. "Yes?" Eleanor asked. "My name is Graham Whitmore," he said. "I'm looking for Nia Brown." She narrowed her eyes slightly. "What do you want with her?" "I need to speak with her," he said. "Please, it's important." "She doesn't want to see you," Eleanor replied firmly. "Please," he whispered. "It's about the baby. It's about everything." Eleanor looked him up and down. Something in his face, some broken truth, convinced her. She turned back into the house. "Nia," she called, "someone's here for you." Nia walked out slowly, her heart thudding. When she saw him standing there, she felt every part of herself tighten and loosen at once. She wanted to slam the door. She wanted to run into his arms. He looked tired, pale, small in a way she had never seen him. "Nia," he said, stepping forward. She said nothing. "I was wrong," he began, "about everything." She crossed her arms. "Why are you here?" "I watched the video again," he said. "I had it verified. It's real, and I know now that Elizabeth lied because she was scared. But you," his voice cracked, "you never lied to me." Silence stretched between them. "I hurt you," he said. "I accused you of something you didn't do. I let my fear speak for me. And now Oliver is... he's not well. He cries for hours. He won't eat. The doctor says he's showing signs of depression." Nia's breath caught, her hand tightening against her arm. "He misses you," Graham said, "and so do I." She looked away. "I came to ask you to come back," he said, "not as an employee, not as a nanny, but as someone I need." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You threw me out." "I know." "You told me I was nothing." "I know." He stepped forward again. "And I was wrong." She looked into his eyes then, really looked, and saw the man who had finally broken enough to see what mattered. "I'll come back," she said slowly, "but not for you." He nodded. "For Oliver." "For Oliver," she confirmed. And so the door opened once again, not just in the house, but in the heart. And what would come next would be the beginning of something not yet fully formed, but waiting. Ready. Hoping. The drive back to San Francisco was long and mostly silent. Graham kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel, but every so often his glance would flicker toward the passenger seat, where Nia sat, quiet and distant, looking out the window. The sun was beginning to set over the hills, casting the sky in bands of gold and lavender, and the shadows in the car stretched between them like a question left unspoken. She hadn't said much since they'd left Sacramento, and he hadn't pushed. He knew he had no right to. Whatever words she offered now, they would be hers to give, when and if she chose. When they finally pulled into the long, winding driveway of the Whitmore estate, dusk had fallen completely. The lights in the house were already on, glowing through the wide windows like lanterns in a storm. Graham stepped out first and went around to retrieve her suitcase, but Nia stopped him with a quiet look and took it herself. He didn't argue. He only followed her inside, unlocking the front door with a trembling hand, the cold brass key suddenly unfamiliar in his grip. The house had changed, or maybe it had just gone back to what it had been before her. It felt colder. The stillness wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Nia stepped through the threshold slowly, her eyes moving across the space as if she were stepping into a memory instead of a place. The warmth she had built through laughter, music, the rhythm of a baby's breath was gone. It had been replaced by a sterile quiet that made the hair on her arms rise. "He's upstairs," Graham said softly. "He's been crying. Almost every night." Nia didn't respond. She didn't ask for permission. She moved past him, suitcase in one hand, and climbed the stairs with a sense of purpose that made his throat tighten. He followed a few steps behind, stopping at the landing as she turned into the nursery. The door creaked open. A weak, muffled cry floated out, a sound far different from the one she remembered. This wasn't a baby crying for food or attention. It was a cry that sounded tired, defeated, and worn thin by too many nights of absence and confusion. She stepped inside. Oliver was lying in his crib, his cheeks pale, his eyes glassy with exhaustion. He barely reacted to the sound of the door, but when he saw her, really saw her, his face changed. A whimper, then a low moan of recognition escaped his lips. He reached out a trembling hand, fingers opening and closing in the air. "Hello, my love," she whispered, her voice catching. "Did you miss me?" She bent down and scooped him into her arms. He clung to her instantly, his little fingers fisting into her sweater, his head burrowing against her neck as though he needed to disappear into her skin to feel safe again. Graham stood at the doorway, unmoving. He watched his son melt into the woman he had driven away, watched the way Oliver sighed into her shoulder like he had finally found home. And in that moment, Graham understood something that went beyond guilt or regret. He had taken away not just Oliver's comfort, but his very sense of belonging. Nia gently rocked him, kissing the crown of his head. "You're so thin," she murmured. "You haven't been eating, huh, poor little one?" Oliver wasn't crying now. He wasn't even fussing. He simply clung to her with the quiet desperation of someone who had been lost for too long. She carried him downstairs without a word and made her way to the kitchen. Graham followed at a distance, unsure if he should help or if his presence would only make things worse. From the hallway, he watched her open the cupboard, retrieve the formula she had always used, measure and mix with practiced hands. She moved with the ease of someone who had memorized every detail, not just the steps, but the timing, the tone of voice, the way to hold the bottle just so. She sat at the small breakfast table and brought the bottle to Oliver's lips. For a moment, he resisted, turning his head, but then she began to hum the same tune she had always sung to him at dinner time, a soft, lilting lullaby that carried the scent of home and the sound of love. And slowly, cautiously, he drank. Bit by bit, sip by sip, the tension in his tiny body eased. By the time he had finished half the bottle, his eyes were heavy and his breathing had grown slow and even. Nia leaned back in her chair, cradling him as he drifted into sleep. Graham stepped forward, his voice low. "It's incredible. With you, he's a different baby." She didn't look at him. Children know when they've been left. They stop trusting. They stop asking. Her words were soft, but they cut deep. I never meant to leave him, he said. But you did, she replied. And not just him. He wanted to explain, to offer an apology deeper than words. But he knew now that what she needed wasn't more promises, it was proof. The following days unfolded slowly, like the gentle turning of a wheel that had once jammed. Nia reestablished Oliver's routine with careful tenderness. She kept him close. He wouldn't let her leave the room without whimpering, and she never forced the separation. She stayed beside him as he played, ate, napped, and bathed. She even slept on a small cot near his crib at night, easing his trembling with the sound of her breath, the rhythm of her songs. It's called separation anxiety, she told Graham when he asked. It's normal after abandonment. He needs to know I'm not going to disappear again. Graham flinched at the word, but he said nothing. He too began to change. He started coming home earlier, turning down meetings, silencing his phone during dinner. He asked Nia questions, not just about Oliver, but about how to be better, how to connect, how to rebuild what he had broken. One evening, he tried feeding Oliver himself. The baby refused at first, turning his head and beginning to fuss. Graham sighed, defeated. I don't know how to talk to him, he admitted. Talk to him like you would talk to anyone you love, Nia said from across the room. Babies understand more than we think. They know tone, they know presence. He tried again. This time he spoke softly, telling Oliver about his day, describing the weather, humming under his breath. And slowly, Oliver accepted the bottle. Later that night, long after Nia had gone to her room and the house was still, Graham tiptoed into the nursery and sat beside the crib. He reached through the bars and gently touched his son's hand. I know I'm not your biological father, he whispered, but I want to be your real one. I want to raise you, protect you, help you grow. I don't know if you'll ever stop being afraid of me, but I'm going to keep trying, every day. Oliver didn't cry. He didn't pull away. He simply opened his eyes, stared at his father's face in the dark, and reached out to grab his finger. From the doorway, Nia watched in silence. She hadn't meant to overhear, but when she had risen for a glass of water and seen the nursery light on, she had paused. What she witnessed was not a performance. It was something raw and true, and it settled something inside her. Later, after Oliver had fallen back asleep, she found Graham in the kitchen attempting to cook scrambled eggs. The smell of burnt butter clung to the air and the pan hissed with protest. I think I burned them, he said sheepishly, scratching the back of his neck. Nia laughed, the first real laugh since she had returned. They're not golden, she said, they're black. They ate at the counter, the eggs mostly inedible, but the moment rich with something else. Laughter, shared glances, the quiet rhythm of two people trying. When their eyes met and the room fell silent, something passed between them, not like the kiss in the dark. This was different, slower, real. Nia, he began. She shook her head gently. Not yet. He nodded, understanding. How much time do you need? I don't know, she said, until I feel I can trust you again. What can I do? Keep being the man I see when you're with Oliver, the one who's patient, kind, present. I like that man. I want to be that man. Then show me, not with words, with actions. He reached across the table and held out his hand. She looked at it for a long moment, then placed hers on top just for a second. "We'll go step by step," she said, "step by step." And as the house quieted again, it was no longer the silence of grief or absence. It was the silence of rebuilding, of healing, of something that might, just might, become love. Not the kind that blooms fast and reckless, but the kind that grows slowly, carefully, rooted in forgiveness, nurtured by presence, and made real one step at a time. 3 months had passed since Nia returned to the Whitmore house, and in that time the mansion transformed from a cold, hollow place into something resembling a home. It didn't happen all at once. There were no grand declarations, no magical changes overnight. But in the slow, deliberate rhythm of ordinary days, things began to shift. The warmth returned, not just in the sounds of Oliver's laughter or the comforting aroma of meals cooking in the kitchen, but in the way the walls no longer echoed so sharply. The silence that had once pressed like a weight now felt like breath, present but no longer heavy. Oliver had flourished. He no longer clung to Nia's shirt with trembling fingers or cried out in his sleep. His body filled out, his cheeks plump and rosy, his legs strong enough to push him upright against furniture. He giggled freely, reached for Graham with trust, and said his first word one bright morning in the early spring. Nia had been preparing breakfast in the kitchen, her back turned as she flipped pancakes. Graham was seated at the table, reading the news on his tablet, while Oliver crawled across the tiled floor, babbling to himself. As he reached the leg of his father's chair, he pulled himself upright with wobbly determination, looked up with wide eyes, and said, clear as the morning sun, "Daddy." Graham froze. His tablet slipped slightly from his hand and landed on the table with a dull thud. Nia turned at the sound, confused at first until she saw Graham's face, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. What did he say? Graham picked Oliver up and held him close, his voice cracking as he whispered, "Say it again." Oliver giggled, touching his father's cheek. "Daddy." Nia's hand rose to her chest, her eyes suddenly full. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath until that moment. "There's no doubt now," she said softly, watching them. "He knows exactly who you are." That afternoon a call came that would test everything they had built. Graham was in his study when his assistant patched through a direct line from Tokyo. The merger proposal he had been dancing around for months had finally crystallized. The numbers were staggering, the expansion potential unmatched. But the offer came with one non-negotiable condition. He would need to relocate to Japan for at least 2 years. Nia found him standing in the kitchen later that evening, staring at a glass of untouched water on the counter. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "I might have," he replied. "That was the board. The Japanese firm wants an answer by tomorrow. They want me to move to Tokyo, full relocation, minimum 2 years. Nia was quiet for a long beat. "And?" "It's more money than I've ever seen in one deal," he said. "It could secure Oliver's future, college, trusts, everything." "And what about his present?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Are you asking us to go with you?" "I was going to," he admitted. "But I stopped myself." "Why?" "Because it would be selfish." "Say it anyway." He turned to face her. "Would you come with me?" She stared at him, stunned. "To Tokyo? I know you don't speak the language. You don't know the culture. You have no connections there. It's an insane ask, I know." She looked away, shaking her head. "It's not just insane. It's everything I left behind. I came here to give my family a future. I built something here, for myself, for Oliver. And now you want to uproot it? For money?" "It's not just about the money," he said quickly. "Then what is it about, Graham?" He hesitated. About legacy, about growth, about what comes next. Her hands clenched at her sides. You always say you've changed, that you're becoming someone new. But when it comes down to it, you still define your worth in deals and contracts. That's not fair. It's honest. They didn't speak for the rest of the night. In the morning, Graham left early for the office, skipping breakfast. Nia sat with Oliver on the patio, feeding him sliced fruit, while the little boy tried to mash banana into his curls. "What do you think, my love?" she asked him softly. "Is your daddy going to leave us for a contract?" Oliver gave no answer, only laughed and threw a piece of cantaloupe on the floor. At his office, Graham sat at his desk with the proposal printed in front of him. The numbers stared up at him like temptation. His partners were impatient, hovering with messages and calls. "It's the deal of a lifetime," Richard, his lead partner, said over the speakerphone. "If you walk away from this, they'll find someone else. You know that, right?" "I know. So, what's the problem?" Graham didn't answer. He hung up the phone. An hour later, he was in his car, driving back home. He parked in the driveway and walked inside, finding Nia and Oliver sitting on the living room floor surrounded by blocks and picture books. Oliver looked up and squealed with joy, crawling to him with enthusiastic clumsiness. Nia stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Have you decided?" Graham nodded. "I'm turning it down." She blinked. "You are?" "I realized something this morning," he said. "I've spent my whole life chasing the next big thing. Another deal, another zero on a contract. And I thought if I just reached the next milestone, I'd finally feel enough. But these last few months have been the first time I've ever felt like I have something real. I come home and I hear my son laugh. I smell food cooking. I see someone who makes me want to be better. And I can't put a price on that." Nia's eyes softened. "You're sure?" "I'd regret walking away from this deal, yes, but I'd regret losing you both far more." She stepped forward slowly, her voice trembling. "What are you saying?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I'm saying that I love you. I love the life we've built together. I love watching you raise Oliver. I love the way you teach me to be present, and I want that every day for the rest of my life." He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. "Marry me, Nia, not as my employee, not as Oliver's nanny, but as my partner, as the woman who saw me at my worst and stayed long enough to help me find my best." Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at him. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." From his blanket fort of blocks, Oliver clapped his hands, entirely unaware that something monumental had just happened. Graham stood and kissed her, holding her face gently, reverently. When they pulled apart, their foreheads touched, their breath mingling like a shared vow. "I'd like to be married in Jamaica," Nia said softly, "with my grandmother there." "I'd go to the ends of the earth for you," he replied. 2 months later, they did just that. The wedding was held in her grandmother's garden, surrounded by hibiscus and mango trees, the scent of fried plantains in the air, the sky blazing with sunlight. Mrs. Harrison came from Sacramento, wearing her best hat. Oliver wore a miniature white suit and tripped twice carrying the rings, but everyone laughed and applauded when he finally made it down the aisle. It was a ceremony full of music, dancing, tears, and joy. Back in San Francisco, life resumed, but it was different now. On a lazy Saturday morning, Nia stood in the kitchen, barefoot and wearing one of Graham's old shirts, watching Oliver, now 3, smash flour across the countertop. "No, no, no," she said, laughing. "The eggs don't go on the floor." "I help, Mommy," he insisted. Graham shuffled in moments later, hair tousled, wearing pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt. He picked up Oliver and spun him around. "What are the world's most beautiful chefs making this morning?" "Pancakes," Oliver yelled. "They're covered in flour," Naya said, hands on her hips. "Even better," Graham replied, pulling her close and kissing her cheek. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore." "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore." They still liked calling each other that, reminders of the journey they had taken from strangers to something far deeper. Later, after an epic flour fight that left the kitchen looking like a winter wonderland, they sat on the floor together, laughing, breathless, and content. Oliver crawled into their laps, sticky fingers and all, and snuggled close. "I love you," he said, entirely unprompted. They looked at each other and smiled. And in that moment, they knew. This was their family. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, built not on blood, but on choice, on forgiveness, on second chances. And it was more than enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more. Watch the next video right here